Got him. Got him. Got that one. Oh, not a big fish, but little Carolina rig bass right here. Roosevelt Lake, folks. Oh my goodness. You know, the fishing here has been tough. Trying to find some of these bigger fish out there. We'll make him get a little closer. Little buck bass. Folks, today we're at Roosevelt Lake, and I'll tell you, we're here during a tough bite. And I know a lot of folks have been struggling right before the spring hits really good and the fish start really moving up. Water temperature around 56 degrees. First thing this morning, throwing a little weed pig from Arizona Custom Baits. And I'll tell you, Carolina rigging's something a lot of folks just kind of throw by the wayside sometimes, or you might not know how to do it. And when the fishing gets slow and you need to get out a little bit deeper before the fish move up in the spring, boy, sometimes you just can't beat the old Carolina rig. And that's what I'm throwing today. And I'll tell you, I've got a little 1/2 ounce weight with a little bead on it, obviously. Then you put yourself a little swivel on. Okay, see the swivel? And then it's a barrel swivel. I'm using a 17-pound test main line. Then I drop it down to like a 12-pound line in the back. Throw on about a 2.5, 3 foot leader. And then you put on your weed pig. And I'll tell you what, you can throw just about anything back there, whether it be your favorite worm, whatever. Just make sure you match the hook with the size of the bait that you're throwing. Mine's a 4-inch. Throwing out there, I downsize a little bit, hoping to get bit by some of these fish that want to move up. Things are a little bit slow. We're kind of working our points and working our way back in. I've got myself in about 25 foot of water, and I'm throwing up to about, let's just say 15 out to 20 in that neighborhood, and dragging. And you can drag this thing, and it's really nice, because what ends up happening is the bait ends up, the weight's on the bottom, okay? And it's making all that clacking noise from that bead and that weight. And then up here you have your bait floating up here. And a lot of times it'll sink down, and then as you pull it, it'll come up over, and it's got that weightless feeling down there. And they hear the clacking of this, and it gets them curious. And then when you bring the bait by, they see the bait, and boom, they go out there and hit that. And you have to throw this on a heavy rod, you know. It's kind of like throwing, your worm rig or your jigs or something like that. Throw it on a good heavy rod. My Taipan heavy action stick here, you can get a 7.6 or a 7.3, and get out there and get them. The 7.3 is good. You can get a good cast with it. The longer the rod, probably the easier the cast is for you. This kind of bait's a little bit tougher to cast than, say, a regular bait, because you got that swinging action here. And with that, you almost have to lob the bait. You can't just take and cast it and whip it like you would a regular bait. You have to lob the bait out there. Otherwise you get a real bad backlash in your reel and things like that. So you want to be sure that you have your rig set up. And the one thing I will say about the Carolina rig is the longer you make your leader, the longer the leader is, the harder it is to throw. So remember that. So I start off with a little bit of shorter leader. If I need a longer leader, I'll use it, but that's about the right size right there that I like. And you can get bit on it quite a bit. By the time they hear and see the weight or whatever, hear the weight on the bottom, and they come over out of curiosity, it's in their zone where they can see your bait. It's real easy. You just throw it out there, and then what you want to do is let it fall to the bottom. Once it falls to the bottom, once it goes all the way to the bottom, okay, then you can start dragging it back. And this isn't lifting your rod tip, from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. You're not trying to hop the weight over. The whole purpose is keeping the weight on the bottom and dragging it. Drag that weight on the bottom. We always say count the rocks. Feel the rocks on the bottom. Every time you hit those rocks, that bead and that weight are clicking down there. It's drawing that attention. That's what you need to get that fish around. If he's not in the area, he can still hear it down there. And just slowly drag it across. You can use the trolling motor, you can use the wind, a little bit of wind drifting your boat, however you want to do it. But you just got to make sure that you always leave that weight on the bottom. Got him. Got that one. I got that one. That one feels like a little bit better fish. Little Carolina rig bass. That's a little bit better fish. You get out there and get some of those little bit bigger fish. Come on, buddy. Ah, yeah. Look at that one. That one's not too bad. That's a good little tournament keeper. Yeah. Oh my goodness. The cool thing about throwing the Carolina rig is when you drag it, you can drag it out to deeper water. Now here's the thing to think about this time of year too, because a lot of those bigger fish will be setting up waiting to move up, even if the little ones are out there. So you have a better chance of catching some of those bigger fish if you slow down a little bit, give them an opportunity to eat your bait. One thing you can do, if you're having a problem with your weight slipping way up, well, number one, adjust your cast. Make sure your cast is lobbing it to where you don't have your weight sliding all over the place. If your weight's sliding all the way up there and it's really not, you're not doing too much, shorten your leader up, that'll help you. If you've got a longer leader, you're having a little problem with that, you can put a little bobber stop just right up there above the weight so it doesn't slide all the way up your line, and that might help you a little bit as well. But I really, really would like to just get the cast down right as you cast. Like I said, it's not a whipping thing. So let's show you how to cast this thing real quick. So what I'm gonna do is, you can see I've got the weight, never put the weight right up there to the tip. Bring it down just a little bit, and you're gonna swing this thing out. So when I go to cast, I'm gonna more lob it out and keep that bait just like this. Get used to doing this, just the swing, all right? Now you're gonna wanna let it go probably at about 12 or 11 o'clock to where you get that good cast out there, see? Then once it falls, engage your reel and just start dragging. But you gotta get that cast down, and I know a lot of people have problems with that long leader with a bait caster. Once you get that down though, this is a fun technique, it really is, and you'll catch a lot of fish on it. It's a great summer technique too, when they get in the creek channels and they get off on the points in deep water. It's just a great technique in general. One of the reasons I go to a lighter line versus the heavy line that I'm using is if I get hooked up with that bait, say on a tree down there, if I hook into a tree or whatever I do, and the weight's still available, if I have a lighter leader, it lets the bait fall more naturally anyway. But the other thing with the lighter leader than what your main line is normally if you have to break off, you're breaking off, say your hook or something like that versus your whole rig. So that's something to think about that'll help you with that lighter leader. If you go with the same pound test, then the odds are if you get hooked up, you can break off right there at the weight. And tungsten weights, I'm using a tungsten weight, a ½ ounce. They're not cheap, so you want to try to save your rig as best you can. It'll come through this stuff pretty good. It's usually your hook that gets hooked up. You'll feel something, you'll set it a little bit, and the hook comes through the plastic and grabs the wood or something like that, and then you're having a problem. There's a bite. He didn't grab it all the way. Maybe he did. Nope, he did not. Ah, they're barely touching it, barely touching it. If you feel like you're getting a lot of bites and they're letting go, what happens a lot of times is these fish will pick up on your bait, and if it feels unnatural to them, they're not gonna hold on to it, number one. And what I mean by unnatural is if they pick the bait up, they might put the bait in their mouth and start swimming. If they feel this weight, if they're going sideways and they happen to pick this weight up, they're gonna a lot of times spit it back out. There's a couple of things that can help you. Number one is if you don't have the weight locked down, okay, that's your direct contact with the fish right there. The weight's not stopping you from feeling the fish. But if he picks that weight up somehow and feels it unnatural, feels weighty to him, they'll just spit it out. The other thing is scent is huge. I believe in it. There's times when you don't need scent, the fish are just biting good, you know, but there's times they're not biting so good and they'll kind of mouth it and spit it out. And, you know, so what I do at DD26, fishing.com has actually made, it's funny, they call it Big Pig crawfish garlic. They've got a bunch of different flavors for sure for the fish to choose from. This is what I'm going to use, and I'm going to put some on the bait, and that way maybe the fish will hold on to it just a little bit longer and give me a chance to set the hook. Okay, so definitely pick yourself up some scent when you're doing this kind of fishing. Unless you're using a bait that's already got scent in it, that might help. But you got to remember something, even if you're using a bait with scent in it, sometimes it's better to put a little more on. And if you're messing with your motor, or you just put gas in, or you're a smoker or something like that, you definitely need to cover all that up. The fish will smell that. There's deterrence to your bait sometimes. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that I've learned is don't ever pack your baits anywhere you've got cans of gas or anything where you're storing your baits in a box. They seem to absorb that. I can't get bit on those baits very good after that. So, but scent really helps. Grab yourself some scent. It'll just add a little bit more to your day. And even if you catch a few more fish on it, it's a big deal. Scent is huge. Got him. Got him. Little buck bass down there. Man, I came off a 20-foot otter down there and I'm still catching these little guys. Come on. You're done. You're done. He's getting ready to spawn. He wants to get up there. He's gonna start looking for some warm water. You know, that's the thing, is this time of year that moon came out and the water temperature wasn't right here in March for them to really move up and spawn yet. So what they're doing is sitting out there biding their time. But I'll tell you, they got to start making beds soon. So they're thinking about moving up. It's got to be getting close. Got to be getting close. Putting that scent on helped though. He held on to that a lot longer because I've been getting some bites in here and they're not holding on. I switched and put some scent on, and boy, that made the difference. As soon as he hit it, he held on to it. He actually dragged it off. I love this because if you look at the rocks and the way the water comes down, we're sitting in 35 foot of water. I can almost cast to the bank and drag it off into that deeper water where maybe some of those fish might be. We're here during the spring break, so there's a lot of fishermen on the water. So we actually found a piece of water there's not a whole lot of boats in. And sometimes that's something else to think about is when you're fishing, you know, a lot of people get set in their ways on certain areas they like to fish, and there could be a ton of boats there. Well, with a ton of boat traffic comes a lot of depth finders, all the pinging going on with your depth finder down there, and the fish just a little bit more skittish and spooky. Sometimes I'd rather take areas that I don't fish very often and get in areas, you know there's fish here, you know, and just work those areas, figure it out. You might learn more, some different water that you find that you like, you know, by doing that. So it's always worth going and getting away from everybody sometimes and just checking some new stuff out, you know. Hey folks, for my tip of the week, one thing really important when you're Carolina rigging for me is, you know, we're using a 1/2 ounce tungsten weight, and then we're putting a bead on behind it so we get that clack. A lot of people ask me, they're like, should I use glass or should I use plastic? I prefer plastic. That way if it breaks from this hard metal, from the tungsten, the glass has a tendency, it'll cut your line if it breaks. If you're coming over some hard rock and you're really pulling hard and you break the glass, plastic's not as bad. So, but the tip of the week is, I put a little bobber stop on. You can get these bobber stops, you can get them at Bass Pro Shops. They come, I've used them up as you can see. Little wire, you put your line through and you pull the bobber stop over. That bobber stop will go on just before I tie on the swivel and the leader, okay? What happens is when you're pulling through, this stuff's constantly hitting your knot. You're beading your sinker, all right? So with a bobber stop, it kind of cushions it. What's really nice about that is it doesn't beat your knot up, and a lot of times you'll be beaten up against rocks or something down there, and all of a sudden you get hit and you break off and you lose everything. A lot of times what's happening is as many casts as you throw out there, or as much as you're beating up the bottom down there, this stuff is actually really putting a lot of tension on your knot and making it, you know, where it's cutting your knot actually. So eventually it beats it up enough to where it'll do that. That bobber stop keeps it from doing that. And I'll tell you what, it cushions it a little bit, so you're not breaking off as much. So that's a perfect little tip of the week. And now I'll tie my leader on and I'm ready to go. Oh, got him. Oh, that's a little bit better fish there. Oh, dragging out just a skosh deeper on the bluffs here. Come here. Let me get off that. Oh man, and you can see we're doing the right thing, folks, and I'm gonna tell you why. You can't probably see, but down there in his throat, you can see the little tentacles from crawdad. That's crawdad tentacles down there, so he's eating crawdad down there. So, fat little guy too. That tells you you're doing the right thing, throwing a little crawdad imitation or something, you know, when you're doing this kind of fishing. Man, I'll tell you what, I was just getting ready to bring that up and he's popped it. We had to try to get ourselves out of the wind a little bit. The wind's blowing probably 20 miles an hour out on the main lake right now, and hard to cast a Carolina rig doing that, but in turn, let me tell you something. Even if you just feed it line and drag your boat, you can still do this kind of fishing. So it really does make a difference. If the fish are down there and you still got to get down there to them, you got to find an area where you can either cast or drop that thing down and move the boat a little bit and just feed it line and get it back behind the boat and just let the wind, or just drag real slow over the stuff. You can go that route too. This technique is a lot of fun this time of year because you can get it out there in a little bit deeper water. You can go to a heavier weight. There's guys that go to 3/4 ounce weights, or if you're fishing real deep, the Carolina rig, you fish that anywhere from, I don't know, 15 to 50 foot of water if you want. Folks, we've had a great time today on Roosevelt Lake. The wind's starting to pick up a little bit. We've had some fun. Tell you what, when you can't catch fish, pull out that Carolina rig, give it a shot. You'll probably catch quite a few fish on it. It works year-round, trust me, it really does. And you'll have a fun time with it, just dragging along, slow fishing, and you'll catch a lot of fish. Just remember, today I was throwing that owner offset shank hook. Right there it is. You don't want to go with a big wide gap hook for a small bait like this Arizona Custom Baits weed pick we were throwing today. That bait right there is real slim. You want to make the profile look slim. You don't want that big wire on the bottom sticking out. So if you're using something small, that's what you want. Make it real sleek looking, and you'll catch a lot of fish on it. Hey, thanks for joining us on the show today. We'll catch you next week. I'm Johnny Johnson. Now, see, that's what I'm talking about, folks.